Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. This morning's program is being broadcast and also recorded. And so the recording will be available on our YouTube channel, as are so many other of our programs. Hey, Bob. So we're delighted to see you here this morning and delighted to welcome Reverend Pat Weikart. Pat actually has a Westminster familial connection with Westminster, but I'll let her describe that as she wishes. Pat is a PCUSA pastor. She's had one of those multi-dimensional careers. She and I share one feature. We were both political science majors in college.
Back in the day.
I, however, did not end up as a pastor. And so was ordained as a minister of the Word and Sacrament in the Presbyterian Church, has both a series of degrees and is working on your doctorate.
Which I hope to receive in May.
Oh, congratulations. Wonderful. So we are delighted to have Pat here today to talk about the Community Health Network. And it is a support system for people, individuals and families dealing with sickle cell disease. I have something of a personal firsthand connection with that. A very dear friend of mine's daughter has sickle cell. She is now an adult, but I walked with her when Shireen was a child and an adolescent, and the crises were extraordinary. It is a painful, difficult disease to manage, and when you couple with that reduced resources, lack of access, it is challenges that are daunting. And so the Community Health Network, in part, is designed to help families cope with the issues that arise from this disease. So let me turn it over to Pat.
Couldn't ask for a better introduction. Thank you so much. It's such a privilege, truly, to be with you today. I just wanted to start out, though. Would you appreciate a little tutorial on sickle cell disease?
Yes.
Just to kind of set the situation, and then we can talk about some of the other dimensions of this work. What you are seeing here is the starting outline of my doctoral defense. So don't be afraid to be brutal. Okay? That's going to happen for me in March. And this is my dissertation, right? The project work is my dissertation. So thank you for being willing to be the guinea pigs on this journey. But my whole focus really began on trying to understand what factors impact equity in healthcare, equitable healthcare. My starting premise is that equitable healthcare is still a challenge for us. Okay? And there are many dimensions that impact that. But I think, and I want to assert, that it comes from the ecology we create. Our preacher this morning took us back to the time of Adam and Eve, right? And we create a world, and we have power also to recreate, right? But this ecology is created through our knowledge of the situation or the disease with which we're trying to deal or respond, our history. We can't deny that in the journey of equity. Our theology of blood. Have you ever studied the theology of blood? It's been an interesting journey for me, and I'll try to share a little bit of that with you as we go. What clinicians might learn, because there is a real gap in the clinical world between treatment and care. And that has evolved over time as we formulate our health system. But I think it's an important thing to differentiate on that. I use this acronym, Black, Indigenous, People of Color. All right, so that's what BIPOC is. But the Black church, historically, has been the home of healthcare for our BIPOC population in the United States. I'm going to offer some examples for that. And then the laws that impact health equity, and a new model that I am developing. Nemours Children's Health was gracious, abundantly gracious in allowing me to do my research there, supported me, and we concluded the pilot of this program, which we call the Congregational Health Network, on December 11th. At that time, we agreed that it would be best for me to continue my work as an independent 501c3, since my theory of healthcare revolves around the healing tree. So I'm in the process now of creating that entity with more support. And part of what this talk is leading to is I want this to be the first step in an invitation of you joining me under the healing tree. So I want you to know I have an agenda. It's to rope you in. All right? So let's talk a little bit about sickle cell disease. Right. So human blood vessel, easy, right? Nice, round, puffy, fully oxygenated hemoglobin, in the red blood cell. We have white blood cells too. But in sickle cell disease, and this gets back to ecology, there is a critter out there called the Anopheles mosquito, and it bears a mutant protein called plasmodium. And when you live in the region where there are lots of water, tropical climate, okay, think sub-Saharan Africa, right? And this little beast, will inflict a bite, and in about 25% of the people it hits, the plasmodium gene enters into its favorite home, the hemoglobin allele in the human body. And it is there that it does its damage. What it does is it reduces the capacity of the red blood cell to carry oxygen efficiently, right? And makes that cell very brittle, kind of squashes it down, right? Think of taking the air out of a balloon, all right? And that gets hard and brittle. And it creates the marker of sickle cell disease, the hallmark, which is the sickle-shaped cell. You see them gathered here? This is an illustration of what can happen in any part of the bloodstream of a person who has this mutant protein, if you will. And it's called a vaso-occlusive crisis. So imagine, right, a blockage in your body, in your head. There's a stroke. We have so many babies who suffer strokes, who know pain of a vaso-occlusive crisis before they can speak. And if it's here in the chest, acute chest syndrome, pulmonary embolism. If it's here in the spleen, all right, the center where the body manages so much of its infection, splenomegaly, it can have the joints. It can go anywhere in the body. These come on with very little predictive value. When a VOC comes on, our patients know that it's coming, all right? And they know they've got to get to the ER within about a 2-hour window to try to get pain medication on board to try to remedy this situation. If they miss the window, they can be with us in hospital up to 2 to 3 weeks, right? Trying to work through this crisis, sir.
Quick question, the defect that's caused by the virus, is inheritable?
Yes, it is. Once it takes hold, it is. And I'll give you a little bit of data on that. All right, so here's our friend, the Anopheles mosquito, right? Get him away if he comes your way. All right, but when the patient inherits an abnormal hemoglobin gene, all right, which is affected by the plasmodium bite, all right, from each parent, then you get the SS type. Now, the differentiations S, D, E, that's simply a differentiation on the hemoglobin gene that is impacted, okay? SS being the most common, SC being less difficult. All right, if one parent has the disease and the other has no indicators, their child will have the trait, okay? If one parent has SS and the other has SCT, 50% chance of having a child with either SCD or SCT with each pregnancy. When both parents have the trait, they have a 25% chance of having a child with sickle cell with each pregnancy. So yes, it comes through, the line, but I do want to emphasize that we have often associated sickle cell disease with Black and Indigenous people. I want you to understand that that is because of the ecology. not because of their skin color. Right? There are no diseases that are related to skin color. None, right? And do we have white patients with sickle cell? Yes, we do. Now, admittedly, only about 3%, okay? But yes, we do. So I want you to take that notion that this is somehow a defect, in with a particular racial link. I want you to get that out of your brain, okay? So here's the geographic consideration, again, the ecology, all right? So where do you find subtropical climates from these magnificent mosquitoes, all right? You find them in where malaria is or was endemic, since it confers a survival advantage, and that's an interesting thing. If you have sickle cell disease, the only benefit is you're immune from malaria. Okay, trade-off, all right? And I'm not suggesting that that's a good thing, all right? I'm just saying that this is what happens when you're in that climate. Here are the areas where it's most effective, approaching 40% in some areas of sub-Saharan Africa, all right? So it is out there. In the United States, about 100,000. This data will vary, and I swear the CDC updates it every month. So there's a movement going on. So somewhere between 100,000 and 125,000 Americans are dealing with this. 1 of every 500 African-American births. The CDC recently said it's 350, okay, but you kind of get the idea of the general range, all right? And Dr. Robin Miller, I want kudos to Robin Miller, who is the director of the SCD clinic at Nemours, and she has helped me with some of those slides, so I want to make sure she gets credit. So how do we treat SCD? Here's a little bit of impact on the inequity issue. Let's just bracket for a minute. Cystic fibrosis, okay? A childhood disorder affects 1 in 2,500 white children in the United States, okay? We don't know exactly why, but I bet you it has to do with the ecology, okay? The environment in which everybody lives and grows. So 1 in 2,500 white children getting CF, 1 in about 350 Black children having sickle cell disease. Now we know, of course, that proportionally speaking, right, the Black population is only between 15 and 17% of the US population. So you want to take that into consideration. But from a proportional perspective, we have 6 ways to treat sickle cell disease in our treatment black bag. We have 46 drugs to treat cystic fibrosis. 46 different opportunities to respond to that. 6 to respond to sickle cell. Research in the United States this year, $4.2 million into the research for sickle cell cure, right? $410 million for the research in cystic fibrosis. So,
are there more? I realize proportion given the larger size of the quote white population. Are there more cystic fibrosis cases in absolute numbers than sickle cell, or is sickle cell more than?
No, there are more CF cases than sickle cell, yes. But I'm looking at the proportionate, relationship. Yeah, but not that much more. I believe the figure is closer to like 250,000. Okay, so definitely more.
So the number of cases wouldn't explain pharmacological.
It probably wouldn't. I think that's a reflection of research intent, and focus. All righty, so we have hydroxyurea, fetal hemoglobin. You know as well as I do that when a child is born, it's often recommended that if you can nurse the child, that's a good way to bring the child into the world. And that's because the mother's body carries certain immunities, right? And through breast milk that help get the child off to a good start. And but also, by God's grace, kids have like a 6-month window where they're immune from almost anything, to try to get them solidified and started. That's what's meant by fetal hemoglobin. So for when a child, even if they are going to receive the diagnosis of sickle cell, the fetal hemoglobin helps them for about 6 months of their first few weeks of life. And then we watch the genotype take effect and begin to drop that hemoglobin as the trait takes hold. What hydroxyurea does is it tries to boost that fetal hemoglobin level. Oxbryta, that drug tries to pop open the sickling, right? Pop open the sickling. Criz, which is pretty new, at last review within a Moore's team, there are 300 kids right now being treated there for sickle cell disease. Only 6 are on the Oxbryta trial. Okay? And that's an infusion. And what it does, it makes the inside of the blood vessels slippery. So those sickle cells can kind of slide through and not clump into a VOC. All right, Andari, pain med, because that's the marker, right, of the VOC, right? And then we have the regular group of pain management medicines. Most recently added to that list, ketamine. You may hear a lot about that in the popular press. You know that it comes to us from the glories of veterinary medicine, right? And is now being adapted, for human use. And then more and more work on integrated therapies, yoga, mind, meditation, mindfulness, spirituality. Recently, and you've seen in the press, maybe you saw right after Thanksgiving, we have a cure for sickle cell. Did any of you see that in the New York Times? Okay. Yeah, well, we don't. And here's why. Okay. So what they are talking about is this clustered, regularly interspersed short palindromic repeats, otherwise known as CRISPR. Okay. So here is the representation, right, of the hemoglobin gene. Right. And what happens is that now this technology, I believe it was 2018 where it won the Nobel Prize. And so now it's coming into the frame, the modern frame, the accessible frame. And what they do with this is they essentially, like you're going through a regular bone marrow transplant, you're hospitalized, they pull blood, and then they go after those blood cells and through a bacterial scissor, they cut out the impacted allele, the gene, okay? Whether it's the S, the C, the E, they cut that out, right? And then reconstitute the blood while the patient is being taken down the whole destroy my immune system path that you would normally do for chemotherapy. But here's the difference, right? Bone marrow transplant, outside donor. CRISPR, homologous, it's your own blood. So those issues that come with rejection and graft versus host disease, those kind of things kind of move away into a lower risk. Okay? 33 patients in the United States have had this treatment, all at Emory. Part of the reason why I say we don't have a cure yet is that there's only one other hospital in the United States that's equipped to offer this. You would guess that would be in New York. And very few clinicians know how to do it. So we have years now to be able to build that competency and that infrastructure. And also it is FDA approved, but is not covered by any insurance, including government insurance, at about $3 million a pop.
$3 million per treatment. Or per.
That's the cost of the treatment. Mm-hmm. Now, let's suppose that you have some bad reactions, right? Which, I mean, bone marrow transplant, CRISPR, it's a year, right? That you can be in and out of the hospital and being monitored and so forth, all right? So you want very, very much to know that that cost can go up. But that's what's basically being viewed, as the barrier that we still need to cross. So,
Do you know what hospital it is in New York?
I don't, sir, no. My guess would be Columbia Children's and the Presbyterian System. That would be my guess, all right? But I've only ever seen it published as New York Hospital. But I know that Emory has published the work on the initial cases. All righty, so we're not quite there yet. So when I came to Nemours, I came as a palliative care chaplain. Right? After 16 years in pulpit ministry, I finally got tired of hearing myself talk every week and said, enough of that. And but you know why I went to the hospital is that even as I dealt with church politics, and you know nothing about No, but I served, my last pastor in Pittman was with the most wonderful people in the world. They had strong opinions about American flags and the color of carpet and, you know, all those other things that come into play. And I always found myself when I was having enough of that I ran to the bedside. Because God was always there. And the pretenses were gone. I mean, when you're sitting there in a hospital gown, you are not given any regard for the color of the carpet in the it's a whole different place. And that's where God comes, at least in my experience, so vividly there. And the palliative care team has the distinction in the MORS. They are the people that are allowed to prescribe what I call the nuclear weapon drugs, all right, to try to deal with pain and pain management. So ketamine was on their list. And we had a young man who was in the hospital 12 days, okay, due to a VOC. And he's had it up to here. And he asked a question that no clinician felt able to answer. Why is God cursing me? So they called the chaplain, and there I was, all right, sitting next to Brandon and hearing his story. And outside the hallway are rounds, and I hear these words, and he does too. Maybe his pain's all in his head. Maybe he really needs a behavioral health facility. Maybe he's drug seeking. You know, he's been a constant problem. Now we're both crying.
Healthcare workers were saying that?
The physicians.
Oh my God.
And I need you to understand that none of this is intentionally biased. I don't think there's an intentional racist human being running around, you know, because we're more aware of that. But beloved, the unintentional bias is so strong. It's so strong, and we have to be so aware of it. At any rate, I'm listening to his story, okay? And outside, the psychiatrist intern says, no, we're gonna get a behavioral health placement for this kid because, you know, it's obvious that we've done everything we can and he's just not responding. So I hear his story. 17-year-old honors, diagnosed with SCD through routine screening, thanks be to God, because we do it now. We used to not do it now. We used to not do it. So he's known he's had this circumstance to manage, you know, for all his life. He works part-time in a lumber yard to help his mom, who has 2 other boys to raise. They're all full brothers, but dad is absent. And he doesn't have a car. But he has 4 backups in his phone. And he's working, and he knows that this VOC is coming on. He can feel it. But none of his rides are available. He hitchhiked to the hospital and missed his treatment window. He didn't need a behavioral health facility. He needed a ride. And this project is my answer. Brand. So, our history, all this comes here. Recent study, not a bad sample size, 600,000 people. Published in the JAMA Network Open, Journal of the American Medical Association. Black people in the United States experience a greater burden of ill health, suggesting that care is distributed inversely to need. You've heard the stories, right? Why does an Olympian die in childbirth in the United States? I mean, I know it doesn't, it happens all over the world, but why here? You know, we tend to think of ourselves as having the premier healthcare system, right? Why is this part of it? Slavery. Right? We justified slavery on the great strength, right, of Black people that we used as chattel property for approximately 400 years. Probably not exactly that. I mean, it was abolished, but those, it still hangs over us. It still hangs with us, the way we abused fellow human beings, right? Now, I'm not here to shame anybody, please, that's not what I'm talking about. But I think what we have to do is say, yeah, that happened, and now we have to do better. So, but the amazing response of the medical community, first you have the polygenists right, who say, you know, the slaves are strong, they're built for this, they're kind of not very bright, you know, and this is how we utilize that resource. But then, when the Emancipation Proclamation happened, the medical community makes a change and brings in the eugenists who tell us how inferior they are, weak. You know, their skin color indicates that they're not really capable, right, of functioning fully in a society. The first presentation of sickle cell disease comes to us in 1904 in Chicago by a young student from Haiti who was here to finish his dental training, become a dentist. And when he presented with the symptoms, it was an intern who was on call, not his mentor, Dr. James Herrick, but his lonely resident, right, who drew blood and said, wait, there's something different in this class. And that was the beginning of the understanding that there was such a thing as sickle cell. But as our history unfolds, you know about the Tuskegee experiments, and you've probably read the book about Henrietta Lacks. But do you know about John DeLilio's preeminent research at Princeton University in 1994, indicating that there is a predator gene in every Black human being that predisposes them to violence?
1994?
Oh, yes, sir. Yeah, in fact, his predator paper was quoted by Hillary Clinton when she was helping to try to pass anti-crime legislation. Now, I'm telling you this story because I want you to understand unintentionality. Okay? So now let's fast forward to 2005, and there's a research grant that is given to Columbia University. And they decide they're going to find out what this predator gene is once and for all. So they pool 150 kids and Black kids under the clinic care who have a sibling in the juvenile justice system. And they give the parents a $25 gift card and the kid a certificate to Toys R Us. And they bring the child in for overnight study. And what they actually do is they give the child an injection of a drug called fenfluramine to see if that will bring out the predator gene. It doesn't bring out the predator gene. It causes heart damage and mental illness. And the Johnson family in Brooklyn, New York had the strength to sue Columbia University, right, for their work. You can read more about this study if you care, Johnson versus Columbia University, but I wanted to share with you let me just get my little piece here. This was from the appeals court in New York. When their son emerged from the experiment forever diminished, the wounded Johnson family sued the university. Although the court ruled that the actions of the researchers were sufficient to demonstrate discriminatory intent, their actions were deemed unintentional. Finally, the Johnson family settled in 2009, after a long period of litigation, for $400,000 to support the lifelong institutionalization of their normally born son. Friends, I say this to you to help you and understand that we need to be aware, right? This is even with the, I need you to also know that the Institutional Review Board at Columbia approved this. Okay, so we still have that idea somehow, that we can treat each other less than. And I don't want that to be an idea that we hold on to. I'm going to talk with you a little bit about the theology of blood and its evolution. Maybe someday you'll have a Bible study about this, but you're all involved in beautiful Presbyterians who know a lot about the Old and the New Testament because we actually believe we can't live without both of them. Okay? So in the Old Testament, we have the sanctity of blood, right? It's sacrificial, it's holy, you don't eat it, right? You hold it in reserve. very, very pure and separate. And then came Jesus. What did we all symbolically drink today? Right? Now, blood is something else. And as we see it evolve, the practice of communion, right, in the context of the early first century, we see blood becoming a separating factor. Right? The Jews accuse us, as we were separating from each other, right, of violating the sanctity of blood by drinking it. Right? But we respond by saying, no, the blood of Jesus is superior one. It's the blood that unites us. Now, this becomes very difficult to reconcile as time goes on, but why it's important is that it feeds into a notion that there is pure and impure blood. All right? There's the blood of Jesus, which is pure and salvific, all right? But there's this other blood running around. You heard a former president say in October, our blood is being poisoned. Okay? We carry that, but also there's this dimension, blood libel. As we have argued over the importance of blood in our theology and our approach, right? We stand around accusing Jews of killing Palestinian children to put their blood in their Passover bread. The Jews killed Jesus. All these symbolic justifications that we have used over the years to explain, to wrap a theology, and remember that word theology, theo, right, God, logia, words, not God's words, our words about God. Okay? So we wrap, God into a blanket of our own creation. Right? And in this, all right, we come up, blood libel is that accusation about the Jews, right? Now, blood purity. These laws have their origin in Spain, which was the only true multicultural society in Europe when we're looking at the 13th, 14th, and 15th centuries. And they created this caste system, literally, where unless you subscribe to the blood purity of Jesus, right, you were less than, you were Jewish, forget it. You couldn't even have a government position or be a witness in court, right? Until by conscience or sincerity, you converted. And who was raised under the laws of Limpieza de Sangre? Christopher Columbus. When he was dispatched to come to America, he had that frame under his belt in his heart. And I'm not saying he's solely responsible for it. We've talked about all the elements in our history. But when you see that there is pure blood and impure blood, it's not hard to bring that to your new land and build on that a social structure that separates us. When we look at blood quantum and the one drop rule, right? Blood quantum was actually sanctioned by the United States government as a way to separate genuine Indian, Native American peoples from non-American peoples. And then, of course, the one drop rule. You have only one drop of black blood, you are black, and thereby subject to servitude. Blood quantum, let's exclude them from social services. One drop, we can use you on our plantation or in our business and not have any retribution for consequences. I assert that we are all one blood, God's blood. The source of life for us as human beings, we are all one. And we need to live that in our theology and in our approach.
Pat,
yes,
if I could
please.
interrupt for a second.
Please do.
We were terribly late in getting
Okay.
started, but we need to end at 11 because there is another worship service at 11:50.
Very good. So let's go this way. When I realized about Brandon's situation, I wanted to find out in the clinic through my research what other needs were there. Here's a guy who just needed a ride. Is anybody else in that circumstance? And can we move in that direction to help them? And so I interviewed 119 patients. There's the data, but here's something very, very important. 96% claiming a faith tradition. According to Pew Research, if I applied that same thing to exclusive white patients, the number would be closer to 29%.
29?
Yes. That's Pew data 2022, okay? But notice here, faith community. Faith is important in making healthcare decisions. What I'm trying to assert here is that the spiritual connection is the connection that our patients rely on first and foremost. Even before submitting to CRISPR or bone marrow transplant, many of our patients want to meet with their pastor to find out if they do this, will they dishonor God by not keeping the body that God gave them. Okay? This is how important faith is. And when you think about it, where is the place where our Black and Indigenous brothers and sisters have ever found equity? The refuge is the church. Right now, I'm not saying that those churches don't have issues. We all do, all right? But that's where the equity was found. So as my research continued, all right, here are the needs. And the way I looked at this question was, what's the most difficult part of your sickle cell journey? Nobody else knows about it. We had a child who was fined $300 by his Christian school for having too many detentions because he was trying to follow the hydration rules and ended up having to go to the bathroom. In a Christian school, private Christian school, all right? Support groups, how do we get the information that we need? You tell me I need to eat 5 fruits and vegetables a day, but I have 1 chicken in the freezer to last my family of 8 until payday, all right? In-hospital childcare, clinic appointment transportation, vitamins, and the incredible transition from a pediatric hospital like Nemours to an adult hospital like Christiana. In most diseases, in most chronic disease spaces, when you're making a big transition, that's where your largest loss rate of patients are, other than end of life. So we want to look at supporting that. So ultimately what we did is we launched the Congregational Health Network, raised $30,000, and we put all of these services in place with church partners like you. Okay. When I saw our pastor this morning, our preacher, his successor, Reverend Dr. Stanley Hurst, here at Bethel AME, is part of our network. Okay. The Praying Ground Church, St. Andrew and Matthew Church, Cornerstone Baptist Fellowship Church. And with that, we are providing a variety of services. Support group, the Fresh Food Program with Lutheran Community Services in partnership. We did a small software change on Smart 911. So patients can pre-register for emergency transportation. The St. Patrick's Center is putting their senior citizen vans that they don't use at our service to transport for appointments, put free vitamins through in a Moore's pharmacy with a small grant from our network. And we also produce an awareness video for distribution in schools, colleges, and other church settings. Now, Nemours and I finished our pilot on December 11th because of what I might call structural racism, but I leave it to you. There are some healthcare laws that impact equity, and the concern of the Nemours Compliance Organization was that the services that we were providing might expose Nemours to a violation of the Stark Act by making the services that we provide an inducement, a bribe to receive services at Nemours. So we supported the pilot. We served 99 patients. Our goal was to get 30. 99 patients, 142 family members, and invoked 35 new volunteers and 10 community partners. That's a success. But Nemours said, Pat, we'd like to work with you on a continuing basis, but we need you to pull out of the hospital environment from the pilot research, create an entity that can service from outside. So that's in deference to these laws, but I want you to understand that these apply only to government-based health programs. There is no bribery if you are privately insured. So here's the new concept, the healing tree. I told you when we started that we want to create a new ecology. This is our goal through partnerships in the community, because I assert the healthcare system can't fix itself from within. So what we are trying to do is to create where we honor the treatment think of treatment as what you get when you come into the clinic. The other way to identify treatment is that it's billable. But what people who are managing chronic disease need is not only treatment, but care, a fuller picture. So we want to make sure that when the dietitian says, you need to have 5 fruits and vegetables a day. Well, fine, but where am I going to get that? What we do in the healing tree is we put it in their hands. God to Moses, when Moses is saying, I can't feed your nation. And God says to him, Moses, what's in your hand? And he says, a staff. And that becomes the power tool. Well, what we want to do is put the resources in the hands. We have a refrigerator in the clinic that we fill weekly with fresh fruits and vegetables. Anybody who wants it can shop there. We have also a program outlined by the dietitian to get a weekly allotment, feed the entire family, not just the patient, right? For 6 months to get them on a better footing, and the services and examples go on. What we hope as we invoke and extend these services and more partners, that these leaves, these relationships, this hope will flutter down and continue to fertilize a new ecology for healthcare. That's the goal of the healing tree. I said that I want you to join me, and I do. This is an example that I just gave you with the partnership, right? Lutheran Community Services with the food. The hospital identifies the patients, and we, the healing tree, provide the funding, the volunteers. Each one of the families that gets food in our program has a food coach that we've trained, a member of St. Andrew and Matthew, who guides them weekly, through how they use their food. Can you store your food? Do you have a blender? We ask all of these questions to help them along the way. So finally, I'm asking you to let's begin the process of Westminster coming on board to join the healing tree. Where can you help? We need volunteer tutors. Any teachers out here that have a little bit of time on their hands who might be willing to help a 5-year-old girl who had her first stroke at 3 and her second one at 4 get ready for kindergarten? Or a kid that's been hospitalized for 2 months who's behind in his work, you maybe need somebody to get him over the hump of algebra. We can use you. Might you want to help somebody get through applying for healthcare, on the healthcare.gov website? Do you know how to do that? Would you let us train you to do that? And then you could have a Zoom call and help somebody get the coverage that they need. You have a car, and would you be willing to help us transport a patient? Maybe do it once a month, to get to an appointment. Mentors, and then a new one, adopt a family, where we're looking for a congregation that might take on one family for 6 months to a year, to help them through a horrible place. I'm thinking of one family in particular whose house burned down, all right, with 2 sickle cell patients, and just need a little bit of guidance on how do I deal with an insurance company and make a claim about this. So I'm sorry that I have impacted your time, but I hope that this has begun to give you some information about the work we're trying to do. And I would sincerely appreciate your support in continuing discussions to see if you might come and join me in this.
Thank you so much, Pat. I know some of you may need to leave, but if others have questions or comments, please, the floor is yours, and I'm sure Pat would be happy to engage with any comments or questions you might have. Thank you for being here.
I really appreciate it, truly. Sir?
Is our church involved at all?
Not yet. These are the first steps.
Okay.
I have to say that I'm a fellow Presbyterian. I understand how Presbyterian churches work. I had my first conversation with Greg a year ago, December a year ago. And we have worked together to come to this point. And so I hope that perhaps we can find a place where there's a heart for this work, and we can continue to work together. That's my prayer. Sir?
Do you have a handout we can take with us?
I have a copy of my presentation if you'd like, hard copy.
Oh, that'd be great.
And I also have emailed it to Marlis and Susan and Chip. So feel free, you know, if you want, like, I didn't spend $150 to make 12 color copies. So the copies I had to give you are black and white. But, you know, you're more than welcome to have that.
I was just looking for something where we know how to contact you if you wanted to volunteer or.
I also have a card, and I'll put those up here if anybody wants one as they go forward.
Another thing that we might do is encourage people that we know to watch the video of Pat's story, because it's so compelling. And I think that would be important.
So, and I was on session for years, and I don't know the answer to this question. So like, what's the vehicle to get us sort of like formally connected? Is that the Urban Mission Committee?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this would be something that the Urban Mission Committee would take on. So,
And are you on that?
I am, Marlis is, Susan McPeters by way of that guy over there. Yeah,
So you're in good hands.
I had a question, so it's fascinating to me. We did a program years ago on the illusion of race, that there's no biological basis for our racial categories, they are social constructs. And I just recently read an article to that effect, reminded me of the importance. And one of the areas that you get pushback on when you say there's no biological basis for race is, well, there are certain diseases that are attributable to certain races. And sickle cell is one that's often mentioned. So your comment about how it would be really important to me, enlightening. But you also made the comment there are no diseases that are racially
Directly affiliated to skin color.
Oh, to skin
Go
color.
ahead.
Okay.
No, so that's normally how we define race, right?
Yes.
You know, superficially and so forth. So you can't find any disease that says this goes only to this skin color. Now when people will say there are diseases that go with Black people or so forth, over time, there are changes to blood chemistry, undeniably, but that's environmental.
Yeah.
You know, what you eat, what you're exposed to, you know, and so we can't just go around saying that because you're Black or yellow or red or white, right, you will follow certain disease trajectories that are more likely to have those disease trajectories.
And is the process by which this mosquito affects people and then it becomes an inheritable trait, is that something where the DNA is
Yes.
actually changed?
It's at the allele level. Okay. So my understanding, and now I'm going to go dangerously over the edge to where I have no business going. Okay? But my understanding is that there are 4, what's the right word, genes, right, that create a 4-bridge allele. Okay. And in the structure of hemoglobin, it goes in at that level.
So it's the DNA in the human.
Are you a medical person?
I'm a microbiologist
Great.
and a
Okay.
parasitologist, so
All
I
right,
know a
so-
little bit about it.
So you can, have I fallen
No,
off
you're good.
the thing? Okay, so anyway, so this is, plasmodium is a protein, right? And so much of our cellular structure is dependent on protein, right? And when an invasive protein comes into play, all right, it creates a home in a place where it may not belong.
So a virus can create a change in your DNA that would
Well, a
become
protein,
inherited.
a protein that comes through,
Okay.
you know, that might. So, yeah, and I'm talking about many, many, many generations of evolution. I'm not, you know, it's not, it's been with us a long time, but we haven't had the tools to identify it.
Gotcha.
I want, can I read you a quote from a patient? I have permission to use this, so. You have to go, and here I am, running through. I'm actually paging through my dissertation, not this.
Thank you.
Thank you. So quote, and I received this on the last day of the pilot, which is December 11th. From the bottom of my heart, I'd like to say thank you. I cried out to God in my distress. Here's that faith connection. You know, that a faith community is a religious health asset. Okay, it's an asset. And so many times in the medical profession, we emphasize science and faith and spirituality tend to be in the voodoo category, you know, but it's not true. It's an essential part of the healing process. I cried out to God in my distress. God sent me to you through the Nourish program, and that was the food program I was describing to you. I had the honor of meeting a host of other angels on earth, and many people behind the scenes I never get to see, who have been with me in various ways, prayers, emotional support. I'm truly blessed to have all of you in my life. My sons, 2 sickle cell boys, 1 third child who died at the age of 9 due to the VOC. My sons are so much better off because of you. Wishing you all the best for your families in the Christmas season, the happiest of New Year's. But in this particular patient's case, right through the Nourish program, we were able to identify that the older boy was hypoglycemic, right? Which was creating behavioral issues that people were thinking, well, you know, here we go again, crazy sickle cell kids, okay? But that wasn't the case at all. And when we were able to get everybody on board with that, this was, you know, a life-changing thing. It would not have happened without the faith connection through Lutheran Community Services that helped bring that to light. It's so important to not neglect those resources as we're looking to transform, you know, how we care for each other.
Thank you, Patty.
Thank you, Patty.